today I'm doing a deck list for Omnath, Locus of Mana. He is a lands commander. So when Omnath enters the battlefield, you draw a card. And whenever a land enters the battlefield, your first land you will gain 4 life. For your second land, you will make a red, green, white, and blue mana. And for the third land, you will deal 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control. Or each planeswalker you don't control. So, if you play a 4th land, he has no more triggers. However, if you do flicker him or blink him, you can keep going through his 3 triggers, but his triggers do not just reset automatically. So our first creature is Walking Ballista. Walking Ballista is one of our combo pieces in the deck. We then have a couple dorks. We have Avacyn's Pilgrim and Birds of Paradise. Esper Sentinel for some turn 1 draw power. Sakura Tribe Scout is one of our infinite lands combos. Archivist of Ogma, it's good draw power whenever an opponent searches their library. We gain a life and draw a card. Bloom Tender in this deck can end up tapping for 4 mana if we have all 4 of our colors. So it taps for 1 mana of each color among permanents we control. So if we control Omnath, it will tap for red, green, white, blue. Dockside is one of our infinite mana combo pieces. We use this to make infinite mana and win with Ballista. Drannith is a good stacks piece. Lotus Cobra, whenever a land enters the battlefield, we add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. And then Sakura Tribe Elder, we sacrifice him, search any basic to our field. Thassa's Oracle we could use to win the game after we draw our deck out. Thrasios, pay 4, scry a card. Then you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you put it onto the battlefield. If not, you put it into your hand. It's a good way to get lands on the battlefield in the deck. It is also a good way to just put cards into the hand. Aven Mind Sensor, so it has flash and flying. Whenever an opponent would search their library, they search the top 4 cards instead. Azusa Lost But Seeking, with this being a lands deck, we want to play as many lands as we can each turn. So we may play 2 additional lands on each of our turn, which is really big. And then we have Dryad of Elysian Grove, which will also let us play 1 additional land on our turn. And lands we control are every basic type, which also makes our lands forests, mountains, islands, swamps, and plains, which can help us activate Field of the Dead and start getting zombie tokens earlier in the game. Fameborn Elder, so the same thing as Bloom Tender, it can tap for our 4 colors. Heliode combos off with Walking Ballista. I do think about taking it out of the deck. It's not really needed in the deck. This isn't like a maxed out competitive deck. It's competitive. It's not maxed out. But if we were playing a better version of the deck, Heliode Ballista probably wouldn't be a combo in the deck. We'd probably keep the Ballista, but we would not keep the Heliode. Imperial Recruiter, we use this to search Dockside most of the time. Raminap Excavator, we can play lands from our graveyard, which is really good in a lands deck. Emil the Blessed has an ability that says we pay 3, exile another target creature, return it to the field. So if our opponents have 4 or more artifacts and enchantments, we can pay 3, flicker Dockside, making 4. Using 3 more of it to flicker him again, profiting 1. So on and so forth, we'll make infinite mana with that, and then once we have infinite mana, we could pay 3, exile Omnath, return him to the field, and when he enters, we draw a card. So we could use that infinite mana. We first use Emil to make infinite with Dockside, then we use the infinite to make infinite draws with Omnath, using the mana to win with Ballista, or just casting Thassa's Oracle. Oracle of Maldai, we can play an additional land on returns. We play with the top card of our libraries revealed, and we may play lands from the top of our library. Ashai Soul of the Wild. So its power and toughness are equal to the number of lands we control. Also, all non-token creatures we control are forced in addition to their type. So when we cast a creature, it will enter as a land, triggering a landfall. So we can get all Nath's triggers going. Ancient Green Warden. We can play lands from our graveyard, and if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. So if a land enters and it's Omnath's on the field, instead of gaining the 4 life, we'd get 2 triggers and we'd gain 8 life. Or instead of gaining the 4 mana, we'd get 2 triggers and we wouldn't gain 4, we'd gain 8. So now we're going to go on to our sorceries. We have Green Sun Zenith. We're usually using Green Sun Zenith to try to search out one of our ways to play additional lands. We can also go for our infinite lands combo piece with Sakura Tribe Scout. Explore, we draw a card, then play an additional land this turn. Farseek, just to search some lands. Life from the Loam, we could return up to 3 lands from our graveyard to our hand. And then whenever we draw a card, we could instead dredge 3, milling 3 to our grave, and returning life to hand just to get us lands in hand all the time. Nature's Lore searches a forest untapped. Rampant Growth is basic tapped. Restore, I don't see too many people playing. You put target land card from any graveyard onto the battlefield, so we could steal one of our opponent's fetch lands or just get back one of ours. Sylvan Scrying we usually use to either search a fetch land or Field of the Dead. Or if we already have those, we can go for one of the things to copy Field of the Dead. 3 Visits is the same as Nature's Lore. It searches a forest untapped. Eldritch, we sack a creature. We search a creature with converted mana cost 2 plus the sacked creatures or less, and we put it onto the field. So if we sack a 1-drop, we could search a 3-drop, a 2-drop, a 1-drop, or a 0. If we sack a 2-drop, we could search a 4 or less, so on and so forth. Jessica's Will combos with Underworld Breach. It gives us access to lots of cards. It's also just a good way to get mana. Scape Shift, we sack any number of lands, search that many lands to the battlefield, so we could sack 5 lands, then search 5 lands to the field. All 5 lands will enter, triggering landfall things. Sky Shroud, we search 2 forests to the battlefield, put them onto the battlefield untapped, so we get 2 of our 4 mana back. Splendid Wreck returns all of our lands from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Summoner's Pact, we search a green card from our library to our hand, and then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we have to pay 2 generic and 2 green. If we don't, we lose the game. An offer you can't refuse, counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. We have Crop Rotation. We could sacrifice a land in addition to cast this, and then we search any land to our battlefield untapped. So we just get our mana back in a free landfall. Dispel, counter target instant spell, Enlightened Tutor. Ephemerate, we can flicker Omnath, resetting his triggers. We could also use it if someone targets him to protect him. We could flicker him and they lose their target. Mystical Tutor, Noxious Revival, Path to Exile, Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, Swords to Plowshare, Worldly Tutor, Gross Spiral, we draw a card and we may put a land from our hand onto the battlefield after that. Muddle the Mixture, we can also use it to transmutate, paying the 3 to discard it and search a dockside to our hand. Beast Within, Generous Gift, then Harrow, we sack a land in addition to playing it, and then we search our library for up to 2 basic lands. We put them onto the battlefield untapped. Then we have Expedition Map. We could pay 2 and sacrifice it, and we could search any land to our hand. Soul Ring, Crucible, which lets us play lands out of our graveyard. Burgeoning, whenever an opponent plays a land, we could play a land from our hand as well. It is a very good turn 1 card if you end up having a lot of lands in hand. It can also be good late game. It's not just turn 1. Carpet Flower is some good turn 1 ramp. Exploration lets us play extra lands for 1 mana. Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study, Retreat to Coralheim with a bounce land and Secure Tribe Scout. They go infinite. Underworld Breach and Jessica's Will, they don't go infinite, but they do a lot. If you have a big enough grave, it's almost infinite. Sylvan Library. And then our lands, lands really matter in this deck. Make sure you are playing a good land package. You don't have to play the exact lands I'm playing, but this is just what I have access to. I like playing the cards that I actually own. So we have Arid Mesa, Breeding Pool, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Fabled Passage, Field of the Dead, which is if we control 7 lands with different names, whenever a land enters the battlefield, if we control Field of the Dead, we'll make a 2/2 zombie token. So it's kind of our backup plan in the deck. We have a Forest, Girl Turf, which is our bounce land for combo. Hall of Heliod's Generosity, we could pay 1 generic and a white, tap it, and put target enchantment on top of deck, which we can go for Underworld Breach, Retreat to Coralheim, or even our Heliod. Hollowed Fountain, Island, Misty Rainforest, Mountain, Mystic Sanctuary. When it enters, we put an instant or sorcery from our grave on top of our library. Plains, Reliquary Tower, Sacred Foundry, Scalding Tarn, Celestia Sanctuary, and Simic Growth Chamber are both other bounce lands we play to go infinite with Secure Tribe Scout and Retreat to Coralheim. Snow-covered Forest, Island, Mountain, and Plains. Steam Vents, Stomping Ground, Strip Mine. We could do loops with this. We end up playing so many lands on our turn that we could play a lot of lands, and we could strip our opponent's lands off the field. Temple Garden, Wooded Foothills. Wasteland is the same thing as Strip Mine. Just Strip Mine destroys any land. This only destroys basic, or non-basic land, sorry. Vesuva and Thespian Stage can both copy land, so we usually copy Field of the Dead with these. So that is the Omnath deck. I am going to playtest a hand. I'm going to playtest this in a way that I'm assuming no one's countering us, no one's removing our stuff. It is best case scenario. I want to get a hand that showcases the deck well and actually shows what the deck is supposed to do. So with that being said, we are not keeping this hand. You're not going to keep that one either. 4 lands, Dockside, extra way to play lands, and a counterspell. That is a perfect hand right there. So we're going to draw for turn. And we're going to just play our command tower and pass there. We do have a counterspell on turn 1 for countering target instant or sorcery. It's not too often you'll find something worth countering this early, but it is an option. So we'd go into our next turn. And for this turn, we're going to play this forest. We're going to tap 2, playing our explore, sorry, which will draw us a card, and we can put an extra land onto the battlefield. And then we will pass a turn there. Going into turn 3. See, Dockside is one of those cards that's kind of hard to assume. In a more competitive setting, on turn 3, we usually have at least 4 artifact or enchantments on the field. So we're gonna assume it's 4. We're going to use 3 of those. So we'll only have the 1 left. And then we'll tap our land down and we'll cast Omnath, which will enter the battlefield, drawing us a card. Ooh, and we draw a meal. So we would go into our next turn, untap, upkeep, draw, and we would play this fetch land, which will trigger Omnath's first ability, which will gain 4 life. Then we'll crack it, which will put us down 1 life. And we're going to go and grab ourselves a Hollowed Fountain, because we do not have white or blue on the field. I guess we can make it with Command Tower, but it's nice to have it there. Which will enter. We're going to pay 2 life for that to come in untapped, and then Omnath will trigger. So we are going to float 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue. We'll tap this down, and we'll float the green off of Omnath. We're going to tap this for a white, so we could pay the 2 white, and then 1 of the white will come from Omnath. The other 2 we'll say will be the blue and the red, and we'll float a green. So now that this is on the field, we're going to pay 1, 2, and we're going to pay that 1 extra that we still have floating from Omnath to trigger a meal, which will exile target creature, return it to the battlefield. So we'll exile Dockside, and then we'll return him to the battlefield, which will make us another 4 treasures. And then once we have these 4 treasures, oh, we're missing 1. We are going to use 3 of them to flicker Dockside again, which will make us another 4 treasures. And then we would use 3 of those 4 treasures, so we would profit our 1 treasure. And we will flicker Dockside again, which will again make us 4 treasures. We will use 3 of the 4 treasures, leaving us with 1 treasure. And we will flicker him again. So on and so forth. You do this, and every time you do this, as long as your opponents have 4 or more artifacts or enchantments on the field, you can flicker the Dockside, and you will always profit 1 treasure. So you do this till you make infinite treasures. So at this point, we're just going to say we have, let's say, 1,000 treasures. We have 85 cards left in our deck, so what we're going to do is we'll be safe here. We'll crack 83 of those treasures. Or I guess we'd have to crack more than 83 because we have to pay 3 to flicker Omnath each time. So we would have to crack 249 treasures, making 249 mana, which will flicker Omnath 83 times, drawing us 83 cards. Till we have, because whenever he enters the battlefield, when we flicker him, he exiles himself, re-enters, and when he enters, he triggers and we draw a card. So we're going to draw a card every time we flicker him, which will be 83 times, leaving us with 2 cards left in our deck. And then once we have those cards all in our hand, I should have been paying attention. What we would do here is with the infinite mana, we can cast, is this Walking Ballista? We can cast a Walking Ballista and we can just kill everyone, or we can cast, oh, I actually pulled it out, no way. Or we can cast a Thassa's Oracle. It will enter the battlefield triggering. It'll see 1, 2, and 3 as our devotion to blue. Our devotion to blue is higher than the number of cards we have in our deck, being 2. So it would trigger, we would win the game, or we could just cast our Walking Ballista. We kept 3,000, or sorry, I think we kept 1,000 treasures, and we used 249 of them. So we would have a ballista that with 375 counters on it. So 375 damage to each of your opponents will definitely kill everyone. Even if not, you could just make more treasures with the meal and dockside right now before casting it, and just then cast it for whatever amount you want. So yeah, that's how the Omnath deck works. It is not always super consistent getting into wins this early. This was pretty lucky. We drew into the meal knowing we'd get into it on turn 4. So yeah, that's the Omnath deck. I will be doing other deck lists in the next little while. I plan on posting videos pretty often. Not too sure what my next video will be though. Leave comments in the comment section. I'm open to suggestions for upgrades, suggestions for just different ways to play the deck, different combos, better ways to play them, whatever it might be. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed stuff and learned something about the deck, and I hope this helped you with playing Omnath and maybe building your own Omnath deck. Have a good one.